we have people do all kinds of crazy things to get customers taken care of. And I know a lady was in the checkout line at Walmart and her debit card wouldn't work one day. And a lady that runs our debit card department got the cash out of her account for her with the customer's permission, of course, and drove that to Walmart and delivered it to the customer. I mean, we just do whatever it takes to get the customer taken care of. And I think that's unique in today's banking environment.
Let me call this meeting to order if I could. I'm going to ask the city manager to go over the agenda items. We'll come back to those others.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Item 1, approval of the minutes from last week. Any comments, corrections, changes for the minutes?
We always looked a little here.
Very good. All right. Mayor, for item number 2 today, report and presentations.
No, you're okay. We just started the second.
Correct.
Do you want to, with your guests here today, do you want to switch and reverse that order again? Or do you want to go through this way?
Let's go ahead and just finish this out. I think we'll move through it relatively quickly, and then we'll get this filed up and start on that. Item 2, report and presentation. If you'll recall, back on August 23rd, when the Commission approved the preliminary structure and financing program for the 3 downtown projects, you assigned the same to your local government corporation. Part of that assignment does include a duty not only to prosecute the development of those projects, but to come back on occasion and report to this body as to what their activities and their status is. Today will be the first of such. Mr. Pittman, the President of the Amarillo Local Government Corporation, will be here to do that. Also on hand will be Joe Esch for a very brief update from the developer while he is out. Item number 3, Ordinance 7310. This is the second and final of the rezoning out in the Bel Air edition, the Curtis and Claire project. Kelly, have we had any changes, comments?
No, sir. Because I wasn't here last week, can I just ask a quick question? That is not now going to be for residential first. Maybe later, but probably not.
Residential development would still be allowed in that zoning district.
Okay.
Right now, this zoning change would make it more flexible to allow non-residential development.
He had talked to me about it. I wanted to be sure. Well, thank you.
I did receive a follow-up from Mr. Sinclair after last week's meeting. He was very appreciative of your action and thought that this really would be what was necessary for him to take the first step in getting that redevelopment going out here. Any more questions on that? Item number 4, Ordinance 7311. This is changing from Planned Development District 126B to 126C. This is the vehicle storage addition for the Jan Warner facility. Kelly, any changes here?
Nope.
Mayor, Commissioner? Okay. Moving right along, Ordinance 7312. This is also a second and final. This is the piece of property that stretches between the I-40 frontage and the street that fronts Tascosa High School. It's going to be a dual use of that existing facility. Retail on the north, auto sales on the south, and the side that fronts the interstate. No changes there. Any questions?
What's there now?
A lot of utilities. Trash is now on the south side.
Ordinance 7313, second and final. This is vacating a 20-foot alley. This is just right across the train track to the north from where we sit today. A public utility easement is being retained. There is a water line that runs through the alley that is being vacated, as well as a fire hydrant to the right of way.
And overhead utility lines.
And there are overheads as well.
And a gas line.
Any what?
I thought there was a gas line, too.
I think the gas line running down the road is not in the easement. Questions? Ordinance 7314. This is vacating a piece of what would be William Street. This is kind of down 3rd Street before you get to Ross, and then north. This is the segment that actually backs right up to the railroad tracks. Changes, comments? Questions? Moving right along. Ordinance 7315, second and final. This is the ordinance amending piece of Chapter 2 and a piece of Chapter 4 of your municipal code. This will eliminate the Board of Appraisal Review. We've had a couple of good discussions about that. Two quick reminders, that is not a group that has met since 2001. The fees which they are charged with the oversight of are no longer collected and will not be collected. The ones on hand will be spent as they were originally collected within their basin of origin. Consent agenda. Item A, in-car video recording system. We do purchase these on a proprietary basis so that they'll match the existing units that we have. I think the thing about this one that I like is it's a little over a 5% decrease from the last time we purchased these units. So I'm pleased to see that. 10 of them in this purchase.
Question here. What consideration is given when, like in this case, we use the police department capital improvement budget as opposed to seized funds? What's the determining factor?
There are some relatively prescriptive uses for seized funds. One of the things you do not do is supplant your general O&M of your police department. In this case, this is in the capital budget. This is part of when we approve the additional officers, we also approve then a capital project that provides the vehicles, in the car equipment, and certain other items of equipment that it takes to outfit them and put them on the road. Seized funds are things that you normally wouldn't have in your budget, or they're one-time type items. The most recent one was replacing those big, heavy bomb suits with those upgraded ones that they can wear with their hazardous materials. Largest use of seized funds that I recall was the purchase of the big mobile operations center. That at the end was just about 99% funded through seized funds. And the size and the price of that vehicle, we probably wouldn't have been able to get to it in the capital budget.
I love it when they get equipment to get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I didn't know what made the difference.
Yeah, it's got to be a law enforcement purpose, and then you try not to supplant your general O&M of your department. Item B, purchase of sheet steel. These are the 4-foot by 8-foot sheets of steel that we buy each year, used in the shop that repairs your solid waste refuse containers, sometimes known as dumpsters. Dumpsters is actually a trademark name there. That's what those are for. 17% decrease from the same purchase a year ago. And the low bidder is what we all did know at Lake Steel, now known as Nemasco.
Is it no longer Lake Steel at all, or is it the both names?
I think they're going to go by both names for a while. First we've seen them since the sale and purchase.
Have we done anything to show if we didn't do this and try to keep these waste containers refurbished, what the cost would be if we just replaced them and didn't do the sheet metal thing and all that? I mean,
we could pretty easily, because we know about how many we go through a year. I'm not aware that we put it out in that fashion, but I think that's a good idea.
No, but if there's any citizens who want to know why we don't just buy new ones, or vice versa, why are you buying sheet metal, then we have the answer. Well, because it saves us X number of dollars. I mean, don't get in trouble, but I just bring a question.
We can get to that pretty easily, and of course, if you'll go back to the bid tabulations, especially on item C, and see what the containers and so forth actually cost you versus what a piece of that steel costs.
And then don't we, after we weld the new bottom on it, don't we sell the old bottom for junk?
If there's anything left.
Michael says yes.
Yeah.
And what's the lifespan of one container, basically average?
The lifespan, depending on whether it's restaurant use or residential. Residential use, usually between 8 to 10 years.
Okay.
It's all a function of how fast that bottom rots out because of moisture.
Now, is that 8 to 10, then you replace the bottom, or 8 to 10 with replacement?
we replace the bottoms as many times as we possibly can, but there comes a point just because of the wear and tear that they just wear out.
And that's 8 to 10 years.
Yes, sir.
So,
But you may have replaced one 2 or 3 times in that time.
That's very possible, yes, sir.
It's one of my favorite city stories. I'm going to hang with it.
we find ways to decrease costs of purchasing. Period.
Okay, item B, purchase of a water line tapping machine. This is a specially made machine that actually cuts into a large diameter line to allow you to connect a small diameter line to it to provide service to a customer. The old one that we had quit working several years ago. They're using a different piece of equipment that will allow you to do this. It's just not the most efficient way. So certainly with the year they had in the water and sewer fund last year and the relatively inexpensive price of this, they would like to get it moving and get back going. That it? Thank you, Mayor. If we could, we've got 3 presentations or discussions that we'd really like to try to get through today in your work session. I do think it will be necessary to come back after the meeting for closed session and possibly for one of these others. With your permission, I'd suggest that we start with the presentation of the independent audit. Please do. Ms. Arnold, you would come forward.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you all? Well, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. My name is Jamie Arnold. I'm the CMS. We are external auditors. Overall, the audit went very well this year, and I would like to thank everyone who assisted us with the audit, and there were many. We officed next door to Curtis for 2 months, and in addition to their day-to-day operations, they are busy assisting us and helping us, and they are extremely professional and very helpful, and we do appreciate it. So today, we are going to start with your single audit report with this packet. There are 3 reports within this bound report. And the first one we're going to start with is on page 1. And it is your independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an auditable financial statement, performed in accordance with government auditing standards. And basically, this report is going to relate to your comprehensive annual financial report, also known as your CAFR. And this report, if you go down to the second paragraph, it says, we consider the city's internal control of financial reporting as a basis for designing our audit procedures for the purpose of expressing our opinion on the financial statements, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on your effectiveness of internal control. And accordingly, we do not express an opinion on that. But if you come on down to this third paragraph down here, that last sentence, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control of financial reporting that we consider to be material weaknesses. And if you come down to that very last sentence on that page, it also says, the results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance or matters that are required to be reported in government auditing standards. So this is a clean report. And nothing to report, and as I said, this does have to do with your financial reporting. The second report we're going to turn to is on page 3. It is the independent auditor report of compliance with requirements that have a direct and material effect on each of your major programs on internal control or compliance and the schedule of expenditures of federal awards in accordance with OMB 133. And it's on page 3. Is everybody there? This is your single audit report. The city has over $38 million in federal expenditures this past year. And based on various requirements, we selected major programs for testing that came up to over $20 million. So that's 53% audit coverage. And from those programs, we selected samples to perform test work on. And this report is the results of that test work. And if you'll come down to the third paragraph in that report, it says, in our opinion, the city complied in all material respects with the requirements referred to above that have a direct and material effect on each of its major programs for the year ended September 30th, 2011. However, the results of our audit procedures did disclose instances of non-compliance that we are required to report. And they're listed right there. And those same findings are also also required to be reported in your internal control for compliance. We're going to go over to page 11 in a minute to talk about your findings, but I want to really emphasize this is a compliance report. It's materiality. There's no materiality in what we're required to report. It's yes, no. Yes, you comply. No, you didn't. And you're going to see that when we get to the findings. With some of them, the dollar amount is very insignificant. However, we're required to report it. If you'll now turn to page 11, we're going to go over those findings.
Could I ask one question? When you find three like that, does that require you to do further testing, or does that not?
No, it does. Whenever we have a finding, we have a sample size. Usually there are typically a sample size of 60 for a specific requirement. There's many different requirements that are involved. But for a specific requirement, say it's reporting or say it's allowable cost, that would be a very allowable cost. We select a sample of 60. If something was to come up, we would have to increase our sample size. So yes, we do have to increase our sample if that comes up.
Thank you.
If you'll turn now to page 11, we'll go over the findings. The first finding, number one, has to do with the capitalization grant. Part of our requirement is we're required to take the reports and then look at the underlying data and the mathematical accuracy. And for 3 months, we did identify some data that contained some formula topographical errors. It resulted in a $135 overstatement of total hours supported payroll. And as I mentioned earlier, materiality has nothing to do with this. This is compliance, yes, no. And that is a very insignificant amount that we're required to report. And subsequently, the city has corrected those reports. The second finding has to do with the Department of Energy grant. There were two, and this has to do with reimbursement requests. And if you'll turn the page, there were 2 instances where the city requested reimbursement, and one included a voided transaction, and one included a coding error. The second one I want to point out, the city self-identified, self-reported that to us. That was not something that we had found in our findings. And both of these items have been subsequently corrected on the next reimbursement request. You're allowed to, when you submit the next month, you are allowed to reduce those expenditures by that amount. The third finding has to do with the immunization grant. And over program income cash receipts, an authorized individual will review and approve those. Well, during this process, there was a change in personnel, and there were 5 cash receipt reports in a row that did not have that review and approval. And so we spoke to the department head, and we both agreed this is an isolated instance because of the change in personnel, and it was corrected going forward. The fourth item on page 13 affected 2 grants. And the Transparency Act of 2006 had a new reporting requirement. It was effective October 1st, 2010, and it affected subawards over $25,000 that are non-ARA. They're required to be reported in a sub-reporting system. The city has looked at this, and they're implementing controls to make sure the program directors are aware of any changes, and they're currently addressing that. That is the findings that we had. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, if you'll turn the next page, we're also required to report on the status of the prior audit findings. And all the status of all those, they have been resolved. There's nothing to report. And so you'll now turn to page 17. This is our third report. This is our report on compliance requirements applicable to the passenger facility program, internal control of compliance. And in that third paragraph, you will see, in our opinion, the city complied in all material respects with requirements referred to that are applicable to the passenger facility program. So you're in this. And in our internal control of compliance, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that are required to be reported. So it also is reported. If there is no further questions, then we're going to move on to your comprehensive annual report.
Just a second. I know we're moving really, really quick for this. Some of these we have to get turned in on the basis of Ms. Arnold for back to some of these granting agencies. Please, any questions, curiosity, comments, stop and let us know.
I really appreciate it. I haven't before got a chance to look at it because I read all the questions.
Right. I just think staff does an amazing job considering all the federal funds that flow through here and to make that few mistakes.
I
It's
think
just
it's
astounding.
wherever he went, Dean, Mr. Frigo, Michelle Bonner, Curtis, Bainham, Herb is here. These are the heavy lifters, and I've always told people there is no such thing as free money. When you start taking federal money, you'll quickly
Find out that you
find that out, and they and then their staff underneath them do a phenomenal job. And sorry for interrupting.
No, please, I would like for, if there's any questions, please, let's do this.
When I read this, I assumed that this would not negatively affect any of these grants. Both the grant itself or in the future.
The city's been very proactive I would not anticipate that, but the city has been very proactive in responding to every finding that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't anticipate.
To those granting agencies.
Oh, absolutely. They're very good to respond and correct anything that comes across. And as I said, the city self-identifying one of the findings that we have,
Very rarely will, I can only remember one or two instances where the granting agencies actually come back and ask for a little more clarification or something.
there were no question costs. If there were question costs here, Jim, there would be, something, that would be a different story. There'd be some follow-up with that. But there was no question costs.
Right.
In the findings.
Coding errors.
And so, okay, well, the next we'll address is your comprehensive annual report. And we have tabbed it this year. The red tabs are going to follow the audit presentation. But before we get started, I would like to commend the city, Dean Frigo, and all the accounting and finance department for their high standards. I want to point out that they received a certificate of achievement in excellence in financial reporting for the year ended September 30, 2010 from the GFOA office. So congratulations. It takes a lot of hard work to achieve that.
You've had a lot of years to get there.
It shows their dedication to reporting. If you will now turn to tab 1, it's also page 1, the red tab number 1. This is our independent auditor's report for the city of Amarillo as of September 30th, 2011. And if you come down to that third paragraph, it says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly, in all material respects, the respective financial position of the governmental activities, business type activity, the aggregate recruitment from this component unit, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the city as of September 30th, 2011, in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles of the United States of America. That is an unqualified opinion. It is a clean opinion, and that is what you want to have. Okay. The only other item I'd like to point out is right below that, the city did implement GASB 54 this year. It's fund balance reporting and governmental fund type definitions. And this pronouncement strictly deals with reporting. It's only applicable to your governmental funds, which is your general fund, capital project fund, and your special revenue fund. It does not impact your proprietary funds, which are water and sewer, airport, internal service, nor does it impact your net assets at tab 3. GASB 54's intent is to provide clarity and consistency in reporting, and that's really the intent of it. But it was a new pronouncement that was implemented. And with that said, if there's no questions, we're going to move on to tab 2, which is your management, discussion, and analysis. This is prepared by management, prepared and provided by management. We do review it for consistency. It's a very good information in a narrative format of your financial statements. In fact, many of the items that I have highlighted, you could read through this and read through the highlights that we're going to address. Because it does cover all those specifically in those financial highlights, the bullets. And so I do recommend that you read it. I know you're all fully aware of it, but it's just a refresher of things that you've seen this past year. Okay, now let's go to tab 3. Page 21, tab 3. And if you'll flip over to this is your statement of net assets for the primary government. It includes your governmental activities, your business activities. This is all of your funds rolled up for full accrual accounting. And if you come down the primary government, and then the far column is your component unit, if you will come to this total column and come all the way down to the very bottom of the page, the net assets which is the difference between your total assets and your liabilities, is $766 million. This is an increase of $17.8 million over the prior year. Your assets increased $56 million, and I just want to note there were several significant capital projects that were completed this year, and we're going to address those further into the audit presentation. And then on your liabilities, the city did issue the 2011 AB general obligation bonds this year for approximately $6 million, and then one of the larger items that we will also talk about a little bit further is your post-employment benefit liability increase, $13.5 million. But we will go into some of these further into the audit presentation. If you will turn the page, the next report is called a Statement of Activity. If you were in private business, you would call this your income statement, presented in a different format. If you'll come over here to the far column, this right here, your total expenditures for the primary government this year was $243 million. Last year it was $238 million, and that's an increase of $4.5 million. Your revenues, your taxes and other revenues, which are presented in different columns in this report, came up to $260 million. Last year it was $245. So that's an increase of $15.4 million. Over here in this far column, this total column, you're going to see your $17.8 million increase in your total net assets of $766 million. Now, throughout the audit presentation, we're going to talk about the significant increases and decreases. But I did want to point out that this statement is converting all your governmental funds into full accrual, into proprietary funds which are on full accrual, and reporting it here. The next tab we're going to go to is tab 4. Do we have any questions? I apologize. I know you have a lot to go through today, so I'm going through this too fast. Please stop me. Okay. If you go to tab 4, one of the highlights we're going to start with is the general fund. And on tab 4, page 96, if you flip on over to the numbers page, this is your general fund budget to actual. And I would like to point out over in this far column, over here, if you'll come down about, you see the $6.2 million, that is a favorable budget variance. That is composed primarily of two different items. You're up here at the top, your sales tax revenues this year were $51 million. That resulted in a $4.9 million favorable variance. In the back, in the statistical section, we present trends. It's page 204 for future reference if you want to write that down. We provide the last 10 years. This was the highest year of those last 10 years. Your last highest year was 2008, which was at $48.9 million. So this is a lot about the Amarillo economy that we've had such an outstanding sales tax year. The other item that contributes to your favorable variance is your total expenditures right here. If you will look, you have favorable variance of $1.3 million. And that is due to management, department head, employees, all combined to conserve expenses and cut expenditures. So those two items primarily make up your favorable variance.
Which one? I was just flipping.
Oh, I apologize. Total expenditure coming across
1.3, okay.
You have a favorable variance there too. So through being conservative and then having an outstanding sales tax year, your general fund did exceptionally well. And I'd like to point out your fund balance for the general fund ended the year at $43.8 million. Let's see that. In that column there? Mm-hmm. Okay. Right across from that page, I do want to point this out. The city participates in the Texas Municipal Retirement System. If you look across here, for December 31st, 2010, it is 92% funded. Now, there was a change in the actual method, actual valuation this year. June 2011, Senate Bill 350 was enacted by the Texas legislature, and it was a restructuring of funds. Now, this did help to provide this number. But anyway, at tab 6, which we're not going to go back to, there is full disclosure on all of the actual assumptions used and the changes. But anyway, but I did want to point out the funded ratio is 92%, which is a very good funding ratio. Okay. The next tab. Go ahead.
Just interjection. Part of that big change, you'll see the previous year was 95.9%. If you'll recall, in the 10-11 budget, staff presented and the commission approved the elimination of the automatic repeating cost of living adjustments for retirees. And that had a major impact on the unfunded portion of the city's pension, and then ultimately the city's expected contribution to the pension to try to make that up. So between those two items, one the legislative change and one the elimination of the automatic repeating COLA, you see just a huge swing in our favor on how that pension.
You just used a different column than you would.
Yeah, exactly.
Explain to me the difference in the two, please. You used 95.9 for the end of last year, and I would have looked down to 70.6.
Yeah, it's the 70.
It is 70.
That was and that one's a covered pay 80%.
So how has this risen from 70 to 92? I don't quite understand.
I think it's the other way.
The funded ratio is the 92.1.
Okay, these are opposite of each other.
Yes.
That's what they are.
Funded right at the end of last year, where were we?
We were at 70.6.
What has caused us to go 22% over 1 year? That's dramatic when you look at the trend below it.
The dropping of the repeating COLA helped considerably. And then the other was the restructuring that Janie talked about. TMRS had 3 funds, and then 2 of the funds had a 7% earnings assumption, and one had a 5%. When you combined them into one fund and used a 7% earnings assumption, we got a lot of assets.
Is that a topographical? Should that be 12/31/11 for the actuarial date?
No.
No. Actually,
TMRS is on a calendar year.
Actually, if you'll...
The prior years, March, right at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Before.
Oh, one's before the change, one's after.
The little footnote, the footnote at the bottom may help with that. And I should have explained that a little bit better. I'm sure that it's hard to just follow. But the reference down below, one is after the new fund structure and one is before. And if you flip over, wasn't going to get that tab 6 back on page 56. There's a complete footnote on the differences that coming across. And you can see that COLA adjustment is down there with it 0. And you can see the 2.1 coming across there. And we'll flip back. And this provides more detailed information than what I was highlighting on.
And just to be sure, this involves that GASB that we didn't previously, years ago, have to consider what our long-term obligations were to retirement.
You weren't allowed to.
Okay,
That's going to be a different one. That's the OPEB.
Are you talking about GASB 45?
That's further.
And I'm going to hit on that. We're going to.
And
actually, it's tab 9.
Okay.
Tab 9. Well, let's just go to tab 9 next. Let's just go there because it's cool. Yeah, it's the next tab. Let's just go ahead and go there. It's in your internal service fund. And it's on page 123. It's going to be the red tab 9. It should be the next one in line. And we'll just go ahead and go there. I want you to look at this column right here. There's a total column, but there's a column for your employee insurance. And this is the revenue and expenditures for the current year. If you will come down to post-employment, you're going to see a $13 million charge to the expense, and that's for this year only.
Wait, where are you seeing that?
Okay, right
there.
It's on that 13.5 million dollars. And if you come on down, you're going to see that's a deficit of $11 million, and your total net assets is a deficit of $49 million.
So that's what we had to recognize to fund that.
And if you come across over here on your net assets, your balance sheet, your net assets, right here, this post-employment liability is $56,900,000.
Okay.
That is your total liability. Okay? The city does not pre-fund this. It's on a pay-as-you-go basis. Ideally, under GASB 45, when an employee retires, their liability would be fully funded. And this is an issue many governmental entities are having to deal with on how do you fund this. And that is what you were referring to.
But we are actually in good shape on this because we got ahead of this years ago.
You have not. You're on a pay-as-you-go basis.
Yeah, we talked about it. We never implemented it.
So when I was on the commission, it was a big because GASB just allowed it. You couldn't even.
Before that, you couldn't even record.
It was illegal for
you
to record it. Now it isn't. So we have to eventually figure out how to fund this as we go.
And this is the fourth year, I believe. Is that correct? The fourth year, that $56 million was 4 years worth of accruals. Cumulative.
I know there was a study done by Arlington back then that said the demographics of the retiree group was pretty close. And they figured it was going to take $167 million to fund theirs that hadn't been funded. That's the numbers you gave us.
Yeah, and we've got our...
So over time, it's going to
get
to be even more than this, quite a bit. And there's a good reason for us to have some reserves.
Absolutely, a good reason to recognize this. And there are some changes that can be considered, number one, in how it's funded, but number two, in the actual plan designs that may have a very, very favorable impact on that number. Mary, you might recall, we disclosed this summer when we did the ratings. This has become such an issue for municipalities that Dean and his group just put that up on the table and said, there it is, so that they would know that.
I think this is why some private corporations have had trouble. General Motors and some others just got wiped out by it.
And again, this is mainly in the retiree health care.
Yeah, it's a different deal, but it's... So over time, how do we take care of this? What do we do over time? Just keep reserving until we've got enough to cover it?
Well, any benefit that you pre-fund is going to be cheaper because the earnings go to offset it. And then even in this analysis, if we were pre-funding the benefit, we would use a 7% discount rate instead of a 4%, and that would almost slice the liability in half right there.
Now, is this covering retirees' health benefits?
Yes.
But it's not covering, there are other retirements, it's not in this number.
No, that was the
That's already
TMRS.
covered.
Okay. And we're getting ahead of the TMRS one very, very well.
Yeah.
This
is just health.
Yeah,
again, as Curtis said, it's a series of years brought forward at once, and then it just builds.
Okay.
I think Dan said well, right now we're doing the pay as you go, and that's worked and that's been successful. But with the changing demographic and with the uncertainty in some of the larger healthcare world, it's something we're working on as we speak.
This is what Wisconsin hasn't been able to do, right?
I think they got ahead of theirs, and they're recalling their governor. It's a pretty dramatic change there, Mayor.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe I understand, but I don't know if I feel better.
Well, it's there.
It's there.
And we can see that, and we look at that. I don't have the magic solution yet. We'll keep on.
All right, well, let's turn on to tab 7 then. To the next one in line. This is going to be your water and sewer system. And we're going to start on page 145. This is basically your income statement. And the total net assets for the water and sewer is $336 million. You've had a net increase this year of $31 million. And primarily there's two items I want to point out that are driving that increase. Up at the very top, here under your operating revenues, you have the utility sales and service at $68 million. Last year that was $53 million. That's almost a $15 million increase. That is due to two items. There was a 10% rate increase effective October 1st, 2010, but most significantly, the drought this year. Water consumption increased dramatically, ultimately resulting in this increase. The other item, which is a little further down the page on your non-operating revenue expenses, this gain on disposal of assets is $6.9 million. That was the sale of the Hartland County water rights. Those two items together resulted in a $21 million increase there over the prior year. If you flip over to your statement of net assets, I just want to point out a couple of items. Your total assets this year is $566 million. One of the larger line items that increased is up in your capital assets under pipelines and plants. I don't know if you can see it's $500 million. And there were a couple of projects that were completed this year. Potter County Wellfield project at $57 million, which I might add, if you look on the cover of your report. Oh, I apologize. I apologize.
It's on page 144.
Oh, okay. I go back to that page.
I apologize. Yes, please stop me. You need to see how much it's done. Okay. Do you see the $500 million? Okay. Last year, that was $414 million. Of course, some of that was in your CIP last year, and it did move up. But you had two significant capital projects that were substantially completed this year. The Wellfield project at $57 million, and as I said, on the cover of your CAFR, there's a picture of that. We went and toured that. Very nice. Turned out to be very nice. And then the combined high service and transfer pump station at the Osage Water Treatment Plant for $17 million. Any questions on water and sewer before we launch the airport? Okay. On tab 8 is the airport. And the airport, after we all get here, starting on page 153. Your airport on page 153, your net assets for the year ended with $78 million. And you had a net increase in your net assets of $3.5 million. I want to point out a couple of items. Up in your operating, you do have an operating loss, but I want to, of 2.2, but I want to say you have a non-cash item of $3.2 million, that's depreciation. And if you excluded that, it would be a positive operating cash.
Would you say that again?
The net, right here, the net operating loss is 2.2, but you have a non-cash item depreciation at 3.3, which exceeds that by $900,000. The other item I wanted to point out was a major project that was completed here was the substantial completion of an airport terminal, and it was for $45 million. So, a couple of items of significance there.
Is that on there?
It's on the left side of the building. It's in the runways, buildings, and improvements, I believe.
Yes, yes, it's $139 million as compared to last year at $94 million. If there's no questions on the airport fund, we're going to move now to tab 10.
On the airport, the depreciation also includes depreciation on donated assets, like the FAA contributes a lot of the cost to the asset, and when you calculate the depreciation, it's not just the city cost, but it's the FAA cost. And it does cash flow the airport, but I don't think we're ever going to cover all the depreciation.
How can you depreciate a gift?
You have to book it as depreciation. You can book it as contributed capital and then start depreciating it.
Want to hear my argument on depreciating water rats? Think everybody's head spin?
Over what number of years would you depreciate an asset? Long term?
Most of these are what, 50
plus
years for
years.
buildings.
Okay. It's not like our businesses where we're trying to do it quicker.
Well, and unlike a private enterprise, there's no benefit to the depreciation of us other than looking, at the healthiness of
Recognizing the life cycle is the only purpose.
only real benefit. And it makes Gatsby happy.
I want a tax refund.
Is everybody at page 183? Okay. I want to point this out. This has with your water and sewer fund and your bonds, your water and sewer bonds. This is your coverage ratio on your debt service, annual debt service. And if you'll notice, your coverage is at 3.89. And this shows your ability to generate revenue. And as we talked about earlier, the water and sewer fund has a phenomenal revenue year. And so that proportionally increased your coverage ratio. And the only other item I would also like to mention is that the city's general obligation debt was AAA rated by Standard & Poor's. And so that's a nice thing to also point out.
Well, I think a point with that is when we redid the bonds for the Mesa Water, that $16 million, when we redid that, lowered our interest costs by $500,000. So that's the benefit of doing these things right, is we're saving money, but we're saving interest costs long term. That's a huge amount of money.
And the water and sewer revenue is AAA rated.
And that was just because of that slight rise.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. Okay, one more time. Yeah. AAA rated.
What is it? We're one of four Texas cities that has two AAA ratings.
And I don't know if y'all repeat that again, because that's worth hearing.
We're one of four Texas cities with two AAA ratings, both your general obligation and your water and sewer carry a full AAA from S&P.
And one of less than 100 in the whole country.
Yeah.
83 or something like that.
Yeah, I did know
In the
that.
whole country.
It's not many.
Did you get all that, Frank?
I was top man when I was
Watching.
at the meeting.
Well, that's a good thing. That is a good thing to point out.
Right.
Do we have any, I know I went through this very quickly, do we have any questions?
You know, we may have, just as we study this,
please.
we can get answers. I think.
Absolutely.
And feel free to call Jenny also.
And would be glad to repost it if y'all would like to have further discussion. We're just kind of
Coming into budget for next year, I think we want to know what really nets us, changes our ability to do the budget next year.
Well, this, and you're again on track. Danny's already discussed your record sales tax collections last year. I think as we've shown, and we're not too far into the year, but I think as we've shown with the collections that we've had, looking good. I don't want to get too jumpy with that, but it really is looking very good. I'm hoping for the first time in 3 years we'll probably begin to see some appreciation in the assessed values for Avalon as well.
I think we're going to have plenty of things that trickle down from the federal government we're going to have to deal with, too. And there's CDBG funding, there's transportation funding, there's buses, there's all sorts of things that we may inherit. So.
Yeah, that's good. But please do feel free to contact me or Dean or anyone here if you have any further questions. I do have one more item that I need to cover. Under our auditing standards, we're required to make certain communications to those in charge of government. And as we spoke earlier, the city has, does everyone have this report? Yes. This
Should be separate.
This letter, if you don't, here. Okay. As we already mentioned, the city did implement gas taxes for this year. We also highlight significant estimates, which we have already talked about, your post-retirement, your self-insurance. The city uses actuaries to calculate these liabilities. On the next page, we need to report if there were no difficulties encountered in performing our audits. There were no disagreements with management. We do have a management representation letter that's already been signed and sent back to us by management. Management didn't consult any other independent accountants, and there were no other audit findings we were required to report. There was one cast audit adjustment, and I've attached that in your exhibit, and that was an invoice. It was stamped and receiving December 20th, and those things do happen. There's a late invoice coming into the accounting department. So it's obviously a very small amount compared to your total net assets. We look at it both fund balance and net assets, but we are required to report it. So. And that is it. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
My annual question. in your examination, in your team's examination, you've already expressed full cooperation from all of our staff. Was there anything, because of the tremendous amount of cash that we handle, and money that comes across, through our till, if you will, anything that raised any suspicion, or that you had to do a double or a triple check on?
The city has very good controls in place. We come out and perform risk assessment procedures and perform walkthroughs, and then do additional work throughout our audit, but not very good controls. That was good to hear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks to all the team that worked on this, too. A lot of work.
I'd like to thank Janie and her staff. They're very professional. They camped out in our offices for 2 months, and they were always very professional. And she keeps us abreast. You hear about Gabby 45 and 54, and she keeps us abreast on what those are every year and what's coming down the tubes for next year. So we get prepared for those ahead of time. So,
Janie, how much training do you need a year to keep up with that?
You're required for it, but it takes a lot more than that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, if we could, to ask that we jump to item number 4, discussion of the recommended texting while driving ban. With us today, we have the chairperson of your traffic commission, Ms. Dubin, who was right back over here. She hasn't moved on.
No, she's still back there.
Right there. And then, of course, Mr. Michael Rice, the director of the Public Works Division. I think as I told you in the earlier communications, the traffic commission did vote, and I believe unanimously, to send up here the message that yes, that's a good thing to do. Yes, distracted driving is dangerous. Now we need to figure out what to do with such. I think one of the possibilities would be to get your opinion on us going ahead as staff and preparing a draft ordinance that, to the extent possible, would match what's already in the state statutes and already in your municipal code as it relates to the use of the devices in school zones, and look at making such universal across the city. Following that, might be an opportunity for either the City Commission or the Traffic Commission to take that draft document and conduct probably 2 hearings upon such. Public hearings.
The
Yes,
Traffic Commission did.
I'm sorry?
You said the Traffic Commission.
So I think the Traffic Commission would be an excellent place to do that. They can certainly do one within their normal meeting time, and we might just suggest maybe one at some point after 5. Do what we can to make that public input opportunity available. Take the results of such and bring it back to this body for your potential consideration. But that's up to you.
The comment I've got from constituents is that we want to be sure, they would like to be sure, that it not only includes texting, but defines emails and other things that take your mind off the road. Make it as broad as we possibly can. I think there's, from what I'm saying, I'm getting nobody that's kicking on that, even people that say they need it to slap their own hand.
Would you envision the draft document, us having an opportunity to look at that at least, to just know what's in it before it goes to the Traffic Commission?
Absolutely.
I'd like to know kind of what operating document they're going to be using
As a guide, and we may want to, is it proper for us to tweak that saying we hope you'll look at these things, or is it better to let them tweak it and give it back to us?
I think as this has been brought to you, that we as staff could commit to you having that probably within the next 2 weeks during work session, if you want to use that as an opportunity to kind of debate some of the finer points and such, get that firmed up, and that would then be the document that would go back for their use as they conduct those hearings.
Got a question to either DJ or Michael. I guess DJ. Same thing. Are you in the Traffic Commission meetings or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you are. Okay. Sorry, I get confused. Was that I get confused. Okay, either one of you. What kind of reason was this? I mean, did y'all talk to the police department and did you talk about what kind of research did y'all do before you decided on all this?
The police department was there, and the main thing that they were talking about was the trouble with enforcing. But I had just one individual, in fact she's in the room right now, that was against the ban, but everybody on the board was in favor of it for safety issues, just like we knew on our commission.
Did you do are there any studies, or did you look at what other cities are doing or anything like that? Have you done that?
There was some of that, yeah. Actually, the County Withrow did do some checking and try to get some additional information that was provided to the Traffic Commission. Like DJ said, they've been looking at this for multiple meetings. They recognize the difficulty of enforcement, but I think they also voiced a concern that it was the right thing to do, sending the right message. I think that was their concern. Beyond that, they didn't really know, I believe, at that point, what else to do except to send it back up with a recommendation and it be considered. And I think that's why you're here today.
Well, I understand. I do not want to pass any rules that are not enforceable. But the part of enforcement that I think is important about this to consider is that it's an after-the-fact enforcement in many cases. If there has been an accident or a death or an injury, I would like to see it be to raise the level of prosecution for that type of thing. I mean, I think we're losing people in this town because of this.
That's what we had in mind, was being able to give the police department more tools on something like that. And also, DPS has been giving a lot of data about the number of accidents that they've worked this last year that were because of distracted driving, and the percentage of those that were cell phones in use. A lot of people are checking their Facebook and everything while they're doing it.
Does Marcus, do you have any comments on that? I know you have to be careful how far we go.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question.
Sure.
As I understand the texting ban, I understand your comment a while ago about constituents. It is broader uses of handheld devices, dates, emailing, etc. I'll need some guidance and consensus from the body here. Do you want me to draft a anti-texting ordinance, or do you want an anti-cell phone ordinance?
That was the question that I was going to ask you. How much time and what consideration did your committee, your board?
We didn't say the time. We wanted to just give it that.
What I mean on no cell phone use, period.
Well, if you'll allow me to interject, we were given specific instructions to look at a texting ban. In order to follow your directions, we limited the scope to only that. So, not that discussion didn't take place, but they were encouraged to once again follow your directions.
It is hard to enforce. But I think the beauty of an ordinance like this is this creates a culture within an automobile where when people are driving, one kid or one adult can say to somebody else, you know, that's illegal.
Yep.
Exactly. And there's a self-enforcement component.
Exactly.
And the other beauty of this is I like the tendency here. This seems to be kind of a grassroots from the bottom up. And I like the fact that this isn't always commissioned down to the board. I like the fact that you brought this to us. And I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really.
I appreciate you being attending some of the meetings too. Thank you.
You know, if you think about it, murder is an after the fact enforcement. You can't keep them from shooting each other, but you can you're in trouble if you do. It's the same.
And Marcus, your
Further clarification, with the advancing technology of voice texting, are you concerned about, is the recommendation pertaining to manual texting? Any form of texting where it's voice operated?
Well, I think voice has been accepted, and I don't know what the standard is at the state. I wish the state would deal with this, but since they won't, I think we've got to look at what parameters we'd like to set. And so we know now there's things like Sierra or the Android phones that speak of text message. If you're hands-free, and I guess how far, there is some, I think, rule from the state that says what hands-free means. I think if we go to hands-free, I don't have a problem with that, but I think that what we're looking for is to stop people from driving around distracted.
Okay.
So whatever,
texting or talking, appointments, GPS, which distractions?
What's the commission's?
What a broad recommendation from the commission?
What's the commission's purview? What do you offer?
Well, as someone who's not really all that technically savvy, I don't think that I could do any of the above and drive safely. I mean, besides the fact that a lot of drivers now are crazy and have to be watching out for the drivers, and if you're not doing that, you're going to get slammed. Mm-hmm. So I just think that we need to really think about what we're going to try to enforce. And to me, it would be like, don't talk while you're driving unless it's hands-free. Don't text. Don't read your email, all that kind of stuff, but then it's being done right now.
So it'd be hands-free. So.
Yeah.
Anything that's done with the phone needs to be done hands-free. Is that too broad?
No, we can run something like that.
Commissioner,
That's good.
You'll get a
are you okay with that?
Yes.
And we can back up. We can back up, but if we make it broad enough, let's find out the extent of what's possible and practical. And I don't think that in this case I would use the same deal with enforcement like you do with a code issue. This gives more teeth if somebody offends. I know I heard a report the other day where one of the states to deal with 18-wheelers, they put very severe penalties in if you used a phone only if it was in relation to an accident. In other words, if you had an accident and you were proven to be using the phone, the severity of the offense was exponential. So
the states have that ability. As the city, we're counted.
I understand, but my point is, if we're trying to fix this thing, let's first figure out how far we can go and we can retract.
Penalties.
Like this.
It has to be penalties.
I mean, you can do all kinds of things, right?
I know.
So if somebody has an accident while they're texting, and you'll be able to tell that they were texting, then they should be charged with, you were texting while you were driving, you caused this accident, and now you're going to have to be penalized or whatever the law might be. That's the way I see it.
And a lot of that at the end becomes a civil enforcement at a party.
And it gives some teeth to that too, though, does it not, Marcus? If we have an ordinance and broken it, does it give some teeth to this civil?
Per se, just when you violate a law that results in civil harm to someone, the term is negligence per se.
If you just think about the people, there was the young lawyer killed out on Coulter, and I think that was just prosecuted recently. It happened 3 or 4 years ago. It wasn't in our jurisdiction, but in Canyon, the lady was killed. Nobody knows what happened with the fellow that ran over the 2 bicycles out there. But I guarantee it wasn't the son. Positively was not the son.
Time of day.
It was not the son. I mean, I went out the next day and filmed it. It wasn't the son. It was something else. People are, I don't think we have to leave a lot of room for excuses when you're killing people with this.
Well, it sounds like we need a lot more information before we're ready to do anything else. But I'd rather we take time to do everything thoroughly rather than do something that's going to come back and haunt us.
Well, and just as a reminder of the discussion this body had, I believe last July, maybe a month or 2 either side of that, just as in the school zone, and you will see a certain list of exceptions. One of those will always be if the user is calling for help, emergency, and then for public safety in the performance of their duties.
Personnel in the community, or strictly physicians with the ability to make calls on the way possible?
I think that would be included.
That would be.
Yeah, I would think so. Emergency.
Yeah, but remember that one of the things we've done is we've tried to improve emergency response for public safety. They get a lot of text-based data now. They did not get prior. We certainly have to protect that aspect.
Well, I think the police even need to be more careful about this, and they recognize that. I spoke to DPS officers that said it's really become a problem for them to train their people to be very, very careful on where
they're trying to incorporate that in some of the new driver trainings for the public safety people because, you know, in the past you had a vehicle that might be moving faster than traffic, and you might have also had a radio and a siren, and so now you're receiving updates to put you in a better position to respond for help, but you're getting those while you're driving.
There apparently is a film, it was suggested to me that before we act on this, we view, and maybe the Traffic Commission view, a video that's out with DPS that's required viewing if you've had an accident. And I don't know exactly what it is, but it does have some things about texting and dangers. So I don't know if we can get a condensed part of that or if it's true for that. I had somebody walk in my door yesterday and say you should look at it before you take action because it will convince you need to do something.
So where do we stand? What are your marching orders, sir?
As I understand, I'm to draft an ordinance that is as broad as we legally can go. We'll bring it back in 2 weeks for y'all to look at, trim down, discuss, and then send back to the Traffic Commission for public hearings.
And they're fine-tuning.
Have I missed it?
Nope. How do you all feel?
I think that's good.
Is that okay?
A couple of weeks, did you say, Mark?
I volunteered you for that.
At what point?
At what
Oh,
point?
yeah. I'm already in compliance.
We're 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
At what point, Counselor, do we have the option to broaden it even more? I'm talking about all cell phones.
Well, that's why I'm going to come back to it basically, Commissioner. I don't like this as broadly.
Okay.
Basically, it's going to be a ban on handheld cell phone use citywide. We'll require signs at all city limits, all roads entering the city will have to be posted signs.
Well, but I think the Commission is telling us that hands-free use of the devices.
That's correct.
Hands-free is still okay.
Hands-free is still okay.
Yes.
That's right.
But there's a
use is what we're targeting.
strict definition of hands-free too, because it does allow you to start a dial to do things, and then you set it down.
And you'd still be allowed to pull over out of.
Absolutely.
Remember from the school deal, it doesn't count while parked, or what's called stop for standing.
Are we at a point where we can stop, go to the meeting, and come back We're 3 o'clock.
Please, let's maybe recess the work session. We do need to come back and go over the proposed tax abatement program guidelines so that those can be renewed. I think we can do that really quickly. We will need a little closed session.
We're going to have a presentation out here by Gary.
By Gary Pittner. Okay. After Gary, we'll follow
Centerport with that EDC's sponsorship, but so we tweaked it then. This time we wanted to just make some very minor changes because it really maybe was implied that if you met some of these these criteria, if you created or retained jobs, because that's the way it's stated in state law. But just so we were sure and clear about that, we put that wording into these guidelines and criteria. So under Section 1, where you see the underlined, it basically says the fundamental purpose is to stimulate growth and create and or retain jobs. The following guidelines and criteria will apply. We made that change. And then a similar change down under Section 1D. It says that a tax abatement agreement must ensure that the periods of abatement are directly proportional to the expenditures for improvements and the number of permanent full-time jobs retained or created. Those are the only two changes that we've made with this new resolution, just to be clear about that. Because you can't have major impacts with projects that can either create new jobs or retain jobs from moving elsewhere.
Any questions, comments, suggested changes? If there are none, we'd like to bring that back next week for your action.
I really want to congratulate Kelly and whoever else does the other departments is to keep reviewing these and updating them as needed so that we stay current. We don't get caught shorthanded by not updating our policies and ordinances and such.
It's a bunch of people, actually.
And this does not extend the abatement. It simply extends the agreement or the legal requirements so that we can continue the existing pre-approved abatement.
It leaves you eligible to consider an abatement if requested within that 2 years. These have been successful. Bell has typically received abatements for each phase of those expansions that they have done over the years, and I think 2 of them at least are now 2 of them back on the rolls. Third soon to follow. So, and that's the basis for doing them on those 10-year periods. Give them that head start, give them the benefit of the growth, and put it on your tax rolls.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, unless you don't have any questions on the agenda or the work session, you can ask for a brief closed session.
Sure. Just so everybody knows too, I signed up to go to a deal Friday that Amarillo College is having. Did you do?
I'm going to go out.
It's about the open meetings deal.
Oh, I saw that. We did a school here.
Are you going in?
Dude.
I thought I'd go just to see if there's anything new about it. Oh my God. Text me.
I'm going to call the sponsor of it.
Hmm?
I'm not going to call the sponsor of it. I don't know. I'll
But-
visit with you later.
Okay.
But can't we go online and take it ourselves?
Every year or two in order to keep
I think maybe
compliance with
I couldn't decide that
education.
a new prescription for Ambien or that. Ambien or that.
Council, if you read us into the closed session.